Greetings, everyone. Well, I hope that you are having a wonderful Tuesday. Today's theme, as I like to call it, is Truth Tuesday. Earlier today, I did a rebroadcast last week's Truth Tuesday. However, now I'm going to speak about another truth. And my intention to speak about these truths, or as I refer to them as learning lessons, is to get you all thinking about your truths. Some of them I'm sure you can relate to, my lessons, your lessons. We may have learned these lessons together. But for others, you are still figuring out your lessons. And I have to tell you that, it's not always obvious because some of our lessons, some of our truths are painful to remember. They're painful to reflect upon. However, they are absolutely necessary to identify and to learn from. So I really don't believe it's optional. I think, if we say, and I think we've probably all experienced something similar to this, but I remember there were times in my life, especially when I was in my early to mid 20s, that I would, almost be like, yeah, I'm going to put blinders on. I'm not even going to think about it. Like if it was, something painful, or if it was like an embarrassing moment, or, whatever the case was, instead of looking at it like, looking at it head on, I would be like, well, I'm not even going to think about it. That old saying of like out of sight, out of mind. But what I realized as I, was able to learn more and reflect more and be more objective about myself is that I needed to identify like those embarrassing moments, or moments when I felt like I was defeated. Maybe I lost a sale. Maybe I, didn't come in first in a race. I was loved. Well, I still love doing these, but I haven't done them in years because I've kind of switched my focus into. Uh, yeah, I've been focusing on competitive, fitness competition. I've been focusing on fitness competitions and haven't been doing like running races. But I think I'll do some other ones maybe in a couple years or so. Uh, I haven't figured out how to do both. I haven't figured out how to do like the competitive racing and the fitness competitions because yeah, I just haven't figured out how to make those work. Like in my mind, and this could just be my mind, I haven't figured out like a cross training component. I do run for training while I'm doing my, any kind of fitness competitions, but I haven't figured out how to like race competitively and do fitness competitions because, there's like you're obviously when you're doing the fitness competitions, you're leaning out, but you don't want to lean out too much because you do want to have that muscle tone and lean muscle tone. I prefer to compete in the bikini division of bodybuilding. Whereas in the 90s, when I first started doing bodybuilding, I was doing the bantamweight for just the regular bodybuilding, but now they have more options. But, anyways, uh, the thing is that we need to, really learn from our truths, learn from maybe some mistakes that we made, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but we have to be able to take ourselves out, like look at the situation objectively and be able to identify, what our biggest lessons were. So I'm going to talk tonight about one of my biggest truths that I realized. And, you know, the thing is that this wasn't easy to recognize, like I was saying. Like, I really did believe, like, well, out of sight, out of mind. I'm not going to think about it if, like if a guy that I was dating broke up with me, or I felt like, some of my friends didn't want to get together and I was feeling lonely. But not putting myself first, like understanding when I needed rest, understanding when I needed, just my time without having to feel like, I had to be around other people, because I'm an introvert by nature, although I've learned to be extroverted. So after I would do running races or competitions, or anything like that that took a lot of energy, even running a training session during the day, attending training sessions during the day, like I remember this with in pharmaceuticals and when I was with AT&T, like I needed some alone time to recharge. I did not need to be around a bunch of people at night. Like I really was the type that would just want to get room service, but and be alone, just how I recharged. Same like if I ran a race, my mom and dad always knew that I would have to go, like I needed to calm down. So I would finish the race, and before we did like the award ceremony or whatever, I would go like do some light jogging alone or some fast walking alone, just to like cool down, center myself before I would sip on water too, but center myself, get grounded, be grateful before they had the award ceremony with the medals or the trophies or whatever. Like I needed that alone time before I celebrate it with everyone. Because before my parents knew that, realized it, like this comes from my track days too. But, I know my mom she'd always say, well, like, I was wondering where you went, because like I'm off by myself, like just cooling down. But anyways, so the thing, excuse me, the truth that I wanted to talk about tonight was just that, like, I I needed to not force myself to be around other people if I needed to be alone. I needed to have enough confidence to speak up, to be like tell my boss at AT&T, I need to have some downtime so that, I can recharge. And that wasn't always easy to me, because like that at my confidence level, I was scared. Well, I didn't want him to think that I was, not like going with the flow kind of thing. But it's what I needed to do so that I was functioning at, my 110%, or I was functioning at my full capabilities as opposed to feeling like completely drained. So check in with yourself and, really ask yourself, like at this moment, this is like perfect question you can ask yourself. At this moment, what is it that I need? At this moment, what is it that I desire? Is it alone time? Is it like listening to one of your favorite songs? We should be meditating and, reflecting regularly, but let's face it, all of us are very busy. What I found was in so many cases, the reason why I was saying no to myself is because I was too much into people pleasing. Like that was my pastime. Okay. Like without a doubt, that was my pastime. If I wasn't, working out, if I wasn't working, like on my job, my working on my quota, with AT&T, working on, prospects, client development, whatever the systems, working with my teammates, then my pastime was people pleasing. And that is draining. So I'd love to know if anyone else has had a pastime of people pleasing. It's exhausting. However, I thought that, I honestly thought like people pleasing was my way to getting more friendships. I thought it was my way to getting people to like me more because I was always seeking to be accepted. Quite honestly, still don't know why. I think it may have something to do with, my mindset with being adopted. Although, like, I have to tell you, like, I had the best parents. You've heard me, if you've listened to my lives or read my posts before, I mean, I absolutely adored my parents. They always made me feel loved. So I wasn't feeling like I wasn't loved. It but I was an only child. So, like most of the people that I hung out with were my parents or my cousins or my relatives who were mostly all older than me, except for a few of them, that were right around my age. And so, that helped me mature. I was around older people than me. So it helped me mature. And then, you've heard me talk about this before. I grew up and, people would have the mindset they would believe like children should be seen but not heard. And so it was, a different lesson, a different truth, but I really had to learn to come out of my shell because obviously you cannot here's the truth. You cannot be successful in today's world, in today's economy, if people don't see you. You cannot be successful if people don't hear you. And you certainly won't earn the revenue and the recognition if these things don't happen. So we have to have the confidence and the know how of how to get people to see and hear you, and not just any people, because that's not going to build your business. It has to be your ideal client. It has to be those people that you connect with, those people that you could literally, and I know this sounds extreme, but you could literally spend at least a day, if not more, talking with them. Like that is how you have found your people. So, back to the people pleasing pastime that I chose. So, like I would consistently find myself, I would say yes when I should have said no. And I would just, go out of my way. I wouldn't put myself first or say, that I needed some time to myself or, whatever the case was. I was always seeking to be accepted. And was that maybe because I was adopted? Maybe it was because I was an only child and I always wanted to have friends. Like I remember like if somebody canceled a play date at that time or whatever, oh my gosh, my world, you would have thought the world was coming to an end. Oh, I was hysterical, because I would feel like they don't like me, you know, maybe I said something wrong. That's how I was. And so I think that, you know, all of that kind of played into my people pleasing, which was my pastime. So my big aha for that in recognizing the people pleasing and saying yes when I should have said no was something that happened, and it just clicked. So I was in, again, still in that people pleasing mindset, right? And I was working in healthcare. This was after my AT&T and pharmaceutical days. I was working as an executive director for my caregiving company I built from the ground up. I worked with that for 10 years. Loved every moment because I'm very passionate about the elderly, and I want to start a nonprofit for the elderly in the next 5 years. I came up with that idea back in 1999 after my mom passed away because I wanted to have something, to remember her. And now, my dad's passed away too. So, and it's not just for my parents. I would envision this nonprofit being for everybody that lost someone that was significant to them, and specifically like the parents, the aunts, the uncles. Like, this is really meant to be an elderly wish foundation, and and specifically for the 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 greatest generation, the elderly who are at or below poverty level. So that's what the organization's going to focus on. But anyways, uh, my point is that I had been recently divorced. My kids were younger. They were in all these activities. I was running around with them. Of course, their dad was helping. I wasn't the only one that was running around with them, but still, I was stressed out because I was recently divorced. And, that takes a big adjustment because you lose friends. Those of you who know, when you're divorced, you lose friends because people usually have to choose. You know what I mean? So they're either going to choose you or your former spouse. And then the other stressor that I was having is uh, that my children's friends, like, they felt awkward because they didn't know what to do, and for some reason they just felt more comfortable scheduling play dates when the kids were at my house, and nothing against their father, but they were just more comfortable because they were used to coming to my house, you know? And so why would they want to get used to somewhere new? So I was going through that too. And then where like a lot of, and I was still involved in scheduling these play dates, and so a lot of the parents didn't know what to do. Oh, well, should I just, wait and then we'll schedule it, at their mom's house, or should I ask and then see if we could schedule it at their dad's house? All these stressors, right? So again, because I like, at the time I was into the people pleasing, I was trying to master that. And uh, there was a need for a new altar server coordinator. I would have had no business taking that on. Absolutely no business. No time to do that because, as an entrepreneur, uh, if I wasn't working, I was the main one that was in, like looking for patients, enrolling new like client communities. I worked a lot with like the senior living communities, and then that's how we got referrals, or like the hospitals too, they would call us. But anyways, it was still a lot of work. I needed to, even though I had a big staff of caregivers, I had very few administrative helpers, and I was really the only one that was in. Well, for most of the time, I can't say that 100%, but for most of the time, I was the one enrolling the patients and the clients, because I needed to make sure that they fit the criteria and we were within the guidelines of the law and all that. And so my focus needed to be on growing that revenue and taking care of my children. and taking care of myself, well, it really wasn't doing that very well. Even though I, was still working out and everything, I was, stressed. I didn't need to take on anything else. Okay. Well, because people kept offering it to me and the pastor, really wanted me to do it. It was not a paid position. Okay. And I had no business volunteering because my income as a single mom was going to be predicated upon what I was able to do, as far as bringing in new business. So I was really seriously going to take it because I felt like, oh, I got to do it. The pastor of the church wants me to do it. The altar server coordinator that was stepping down wants me to do it. Uh, the secretary of God of the church, for God's sakes, wanted me to do it. So I felt like I had to do it. And I remember telling my one of my best friends, I told her, I was like, yeah, Marianne, I think I'm gonna have to do this. And she was like, what? And she was like, why would you do that when you have, you're already stressed, you're, short on time. If it wasn't for her stopping me and, talking this through with me, I would have got myself into a situation where then it just wouldn't have been a good situation. And that's when I realized, like, I was people pleasing. It was a pattern. So I had to break it. So the first way to break a pattern, if you haven't done this before, is becoming aware of it, accepting it, like, okay, I've got this people pleasing problem. What am I going to do about it? And so that at that point, because Marianne did help me with that significantly, then I was able to recognize and know that I needed to put myself first. And I had to realize that it's okay to say no. Like, it's necessary to say no. And I was really not okay with that at you know, at the beginning. I was really not okay with that. I would struggle and I would say stuff like that, like, well, I have to because they really want me to, you know. Like I was like some 5-year-old that didn't know what, well, in some cases I didn't, I didn't understand how to say no. And I really felt like, in a lot of cases, like my back was against the wall and I needed to do it to be accepted. That, my friends, is not the way to go about things. When we say yes and when we commit to things, then, of course, we have to be like 110% behind it. We have to have, the time, meaning the resources. I would have been jeopardizing my revenue production with my business, which would have been, impacted me and my kids, because I had up and down, up and down, up and down earnings for a while with my caregiving company, because the main issue with that was, people would come to us. So we would have patients and clients. We did non medical caregiving. And like I said, I loved it. But they would come to us. And then, unfortunately, because they had, Alzheimer's or cancer or they had health conditions, that's why they needed us as a caregiver, right? To supplement, to help with their family caregivers. Well, some of them would pass away. And they usually passed away like in groups of 3. Very strange. That was the pattern. And that meant, there would be revenue dips because when we had a live-in client was anywhere from like $8 to $14,000 a month. So you lose 3 of those, that's a pretty big hit. So that, they would pass away sometimes. And then other times, like if it was like a hip surgery, knee surgery, they would get better, which was great, good scenario, but then they didn't need us anymore, or they put us like on a maintenance. That was just the nature of the business. But I was more of a boutique caregiving agency. So I didn't, scale to millions. I was more boutique because I really wanted to get to know all my families. And I was, it was very important to me that I was managing their care plan. Even though I had the caregiving staff to do that, I was, the one that would make the changes for the care plan. I would interface with the care directors at the facilities and things like that. So, anyways, so for me to be saying yes when I should have said no was not, a good thing. And thankfully, my friend Marianne, talked through everything with me and really asked me the right questions, which then made me realize that I was people pleasing as a pastime. And that's not the way to go about it. Because again, like when you overcommit yourself, then again, you're not doing yourself a service. And then, quite frankly, probably not 110% in whatever you're overcommitted to, right? So, big learning lesson, big truth for me. And that's when I decided to give up people pleasing as a pastime. So, my question to you is this something that you can relate to? Perhaps you used to people please. Perhaps you're recognizing, some truths that have been learning lessons to you. And like I said, earlier, some of these truths, they're not easy to recognize. Like you really have to kind of step out of the situation and then be able to reflect on it with clear vision and really just letting go of any kind of biases that you have on yourself and just really being able to look at it straight on, straight on, like if you were looking in on someone else's life. And that's one of the biggest things that I noticed with myself. Like if I did, take a few steps to the right and then look like what would I be observing if this was somebody else? What is it? What would I be observing? What notes would I take so that I could clearly understand and get to the bottom of this? So, like I said, maybe perhaps for you, maybe you can relate and you can, kind of identify and be like, yeah, you were people pleasing too, or um, perhaps another truth that you recognize. So, do let me know what you're recognizing, what you're seeing about yourself, and very important, like, once you do recognize it, what are you gonna do about it? How are you gonna do the self-checks? How are you gonna hold yourself accountable so that you can course correct, your behaviors, like the behaviors that you need to let go of, that you need to stop doing, like, in my case, the people-pleasing pastime, and making sure that you recognize and reward yourself. Don't just slough it off like, yeah, okay, that's done. No, recognize and reward yourself, but then also know that there will be times when, like that less than desirable behavior comes back again, or you might be tempted. In my case, like with the people pleasing, you might be tempted to say yes when you should say no. How are you going to, recognize that? Make sure again you reward yourself for, it can be simple as a pat on the back, but reward yourself and hold yourself accountable. So let me know what your truth is and what you plan to do about that.